don't like this topic. I feel like a big dumb every time I talk about it, because I know there's so much I could never understand about the inner workings, and I know talking about it changes nothing at all. But it comes up a lot, and I made the mistake of never having a dedicated thoughts video. It was always mixed in with other stuff. I was gonna have this whole thing as part of the Modern Warfare review, but it got too long, and I never want to bring it up and need to repeat myself again, so I'm gonna compile everything I think about skill-based matchmaking in one place to have something I can link that should last a couple years. Maybe my opinion will change over time though. Opinions do that. Who knows? Couple things, this is not about Cold War. I have nothing to say about how strong it may or may not be. No clue. And also, yes, I know there's always been SBMM in COD games. You don't have to tell me. We are talking about how strong it is, or how it's implemented, like how quickly it reacts to your recent performance, and how much it prioritizes, however it judges skill, compared to all the other factors it uses. Because I think that formula clearly does change year to year. To pretend it's been identical for a dozen years with no tuning is insane. What I typically see countering SBMM complainers is, oh, so you just want to pubstomp noobs all day, and you actually have to try for once, and you're whining about that. Well, too bad. Yeah, pubstomping is not where I'm coming from at all, and I do get that, like seeing streamers and pros complaining about needing to sweat. It doesn't invoke much sympathy. People are going to see that and think, oh, boo-hoo for you, well, we don't like getting stomped by you. You are sweat incarnate, so shut up and enjoy your sweaty lobbies. Not a great image for the anti-SBMM group, and in theory, playing people that are a similar skill to you sounds reasonable in concept. Like, what's wrong with that? I often see people genuinely asking, what is so bad about SBMM? I want to understand. So here's my honest answer, which you may not fully agree with, but I hope I can show that it isn't about stomping noobs, at least to me. With how it's implemented in these games, especially coming off Modern Warfare, from my perspective as someone who's not even that good, like my KD is pretty close to 1 in every COD, I still think there are several reasons that having it be too strict is bad design and really hurts the fun. For the record, I'm all for the lowest skill people having some sort of protected bracket. I don't want someone who can hardly even defend themselves getting beat up on and having an impossibly hard time. But for any player who takes the game even a little seriously, whether you're starting off good or bad, there's no incentive to improve in the strong skill matching system when you aren't facing a random selection of the player base and proving your skills, and you also have no visible skill rank. It needs to be one or the other, because I often see frustration from people who are below a 1 KD and are actively trying to improve, and they get frustrated with how they feel punished by it. Because if they start to do better, they just run into the next level of players, and with no rank to show for their improvement, they don't even know if they're making more mistakes, or if that's just how the game controls things behind the scenes. There's no incentive to want to learn and practice to rise up the scoreboard and be that guy at the top getting more streaks, because no matter what, the game will curate the experience to level the playing field. Again, with no rank to show to know how good you are, you're just secretly punished for getting better. That's one reason I think it's bad for anyone who takes it seriously enough to want to improve. When I hear that this SBMM helps people improve, I don't really see that, because 1, it removes the incentive to improve, and 2, fighting people better than you requires you to improve to be able to compete, while fighting your heavily curated equals allows you to be complacent with bad habits. So I see this as really only good for the ultra casual who doesn't care, just wants to hop on for a few games and get the same predictably average experience each time, which I see as antithetical to what fun online gaming is, a varied experience where you want to improve. Starting out can be rough at first, but I remember I wasn't frustrated by being a complete bot when I started out because I knew I was a bot. I didn't have any expectation of doing well. I was happy to get XP by shooting down UAVs, but I found improvement very rewarding. I saw myself get better. I learned. I practiced. If I were starting now, I might get more instant gratification of winning more gunfights right off the bat, but I don't see myself getting invested and hanging around for long. I know things may be different these days with how much more skilled the player base has become, but I really don't see my philosophy being any different. In the case of Modern Warfare, for example, especially early on, because it seems like their matchmaking was tweaked over time, but it would react so quickly to your recent performance that it felt like the game was deciding how well you would perform instead of you, which I think was awful. If you had a great game or two, you could be pretty sure the next few would be a wash. And that meant when doing poorly, it was easy to blame the game instead of yourself, which is never a healthy or fun thing. And it isn't just about your tough games, it's also the same with the flip side. Your good games, your accomplishments could also feel hollow because you could just assume the game gave you easy enemies because you were struggling for a little while. If the game makes you feel like there's no point in trying to do better because your end result will end up being the same either way, with bouncing back and forth between harder and easier lobbies, I think that is clearly bad design. I want to be able to blame and credit myself for my failures and successes. That's nothing to do with pub stomping. I'm not a pub stomper. My aim is pretty atrocious, but I feel these games have no purpose when my performance is so predictable, and I don't feel like I'm even the primary one in control of it. You know, looking at what COD is, SBMM is much better suited to an actual competitive environment. COD pubs are inherently not that competitive. There are tons of cheesy strategies, weapons, campy, safe space corners, and all that allow players of any skill to find success. It's always been that way. There's a reason Pro COD needs to ban half the maps and guns, and that's fine. That's what this game is. I would go play CS for a better competitive experience. Competitive games where you're chasing a rank are fun too. COD pubs are kind of built as a casual, arcadey, grindy game that already gives casual players lots of ways to succeed. So the matchmaking on top seems very out of place to me. Another complaint you'll see commonly is that this matchmaking makes it hard to enjoy casually trying goofy strategies or off-meta loadouts, that is, unless you want to commit to them for several games to get gradually lowered down to where you might find success with them, but then it's like you're practically inadvertently reverse boosting just because you're using a bad gun. Like if you swap back to a good gun, now you're ruining people's games unfairly for a game or two, and that really did happen a lot whenever I needed to work on riot shield camos in Modern Warfare. I wasn't trying to smurf, and I've never done any reverse boosting outside of betas. I just couldn't avoid it. I was going for Damascus. That is another issue with how this matchmaking can be easily abused by the assholes who do just want to stomp noobs all day. Reverse boosting or using a low skill alt account makes it fairly simple to ruin people's experience. Shockingly, I do think that's a bad thing, and it wouldn't be nearly as possible in a mixed lobby system. Strong SBMM is ironically what allows you to stomp lobbies full of noobs. To drill down on that, remember, having weaker SBMM doesn't mean stomping noobs all day. It means mixed lobbies, a random selection of the player base. With proper team balancing, there will be some above average players on both teams and some below average players on both teams. Yeah, I remember the days when bad team balance was what people complained about. So obviously the people who put in the time to master the game over decades will have that pay off and do better more frequently, and I think that's deserved. You should be rewarded for putting in the time. It's a casual multiplayer game. I don't like forced equity. And there are still good players on the other team capable of shutting those good players down. Meanwhile, the lower skill people still have a great chance against many of the enemies that are similar to them. And it's COD, so you realistically have a chance against anyone. Over time, you should want to get better and become that guy at the top, and that system allows you to do that without the mysterious behind-the-scenes manipulation. Another big point is how it ruins partying up with friends of different skill levels. It was incredibly apparent in Modern Warfare, and that's a big deal. I have no desire to party up with friends whatsoever, because unless everyone is about the same, some of those people are going to have a real bad time. You might say, well, without SBMM, it wouldn't be better though. That would just mean that your lower skill friend would be having a bad time all the time. But the thing is, again, mixed lobbies is a very different feel than everyone being similar and better than you. I would much rather we were always facing a random spectrum of the player base than partying up with a good friend where everyone is good and there's nobody like me on the other team. One of the final main points I'll bring up, but don't have much to say about, is connection quality. I know for some of the best players, I always hear stuff about how long their queue times become, or how their connection suffers because they assume it's prioritizing skill highly enough to affect their connection, searching farther away to find an appropriate skill match. It seems like there's a lot of people showing their evidence for that, like they can try a dummy account and always get way faster matches. I just have nothing to add whatsoever. I know the official response is always that connection is prioritized over skill is factored in second. I assume it's true that connection is priority one, but skill does clearly seem to impact it sometimes, and yeah, I'd say that's a bad thing. I just don't have anything to add on how bad it can get. I'm not anywhere near that high on the bell curve, and I live on the West Coast, where I have plenty of people to connect to, so I don't think I run into those issues, but that is a major concern. For some people, it's the biggest issue they have with the system. The bottom line is, a lot of people of varying skill levels see SBMM as making the game incredibly boring and unmotivating. Like there's nothing to gain, no reason to improve, when the game will decide whether you get an easy or hard time, on top of the other issues it can cause, like the playing with friends and connections. So if you were wondering what this side of the argument was about, I hope I did an okay job representing it, and this may help you see why people feel it completely destroys the casual COD that used to exist. In my searching to see more of what the opposite side was saying, they're usually not treated very well on the Reddit, of course, because that's where you're going to find the more involved players, but I always found similar stuff. I'm glad I don't get pubstomped all the time, and you guys are lame for just wanting to pubstomp all the time. Again, this impression that looser SBMM would suddenly mean it's all pros versus all noobs? Well, no, it shouldn't be. And I like this. Before you downvote and cry about this, think about how you'd feel losing to Korean Savage. Well, I think he might like to be showing up in your lobbies, my friend, not ours. SBMM might not help you in that case. The interesting takeaway, though, for me, is that people on this side sometimes fully admit they aren't interested in improving. I don't want to get better, I don't care about that. So he'd prefer the game just equalizes his experience. That really is the core of where I strongly fundamentally differ. I think that is the, quote, lame attitude to have, not the people who care most about the game and are trying to improve. I don't agree with taking the satisfaction away from those players and giving it to you so you don't have to improve to get the same experience. I think I've just described communism, except instead of being about human survival, it's about being able to have fun in a multiplayer game. I also don't think Monopoly would be very fun if my Park Place hotels got redistributed, but I guess that's just what I think is fun about games as abstractions of reality. Speaking of communism, in regards to the upcoming Cold War, as I've said, I don't have a good personal indication on what is there, and even if we knew, they could easily change it up for the full game. Lots of people said it was strong as hell, but their evidence is usually, I did good in my first game and then the next one was sweaty. Yeah, randomness can do that too. Meanwhile, I do know good players who didn't have that experience. Obviously, it is a factor of the matchmaking, like it always is. I just can't comment on how it's really working. But I will just say, regardless of whether it's on the stronger or weaker side, I do not blame the players for complaining about it. Activision has taken the route of being so secretive about it, even lying at times, like for Warzone, and hiding it, making stats harder to look up. It's a major concern people have, and they outright refuse to ever speak about it, because I guess they think acknowledging it officially would be too damaging. So I think they reap what they sow with being secretive when people are understandably confused and upset. The default assumption, in absence of any evidence, is not that the SBMM is weak. Why would it be? They haven't built that trust. In the case of Modern Warfare, if there's no good tested evidence for either side, and there's only a mountain of anecdote and clips and people partying up with better friends and getting smacked every time, everyone saying, look how obvious this is, I'm gonna side with that. Maybe in an irresponsible way sometimes, but it isn't like there's a mountain of evidence disproving it and a few conspiracy idiots feeling like it's there. Like, I don't know, anti-vaxxers as a random example. Yeah, that's obviously not an apt comparison here at all. So I guess that's why, whether I feel it's there or not, I don't have a problem with people complaining about it. In some ways, I usually hate when people complain about something when I think they're wrong, because I'm on the same side, and it's a bad look. I mean, you look stupid if you're complaining about something that isn't actually there. That would show that we have no clue what we're feeling, and will complain no matter what. So maybe they would see that and think, well, no point changing anything. They don't even know. They'll complain regardless. And for that reason, I'll always say what I honestly feel. Like, I didn't feel that the SBMM in the Cold War Alpha was anywhere near strong. I did consistently, strangely well for a stretch of about 30 games, with a few random harder games thrown in, as you'd expect, but no obvious pattern like Modern Warfare. It was a shocking change of pace. Some people did feel it, or were maybe expecting to feel it after coming from Modern Warfare, but at this point, I don't mind the complaints, right or wrong, because it demonstrates that people aren't happy, as they have the right to be. They're upset about last year, and they're tired with the secret keeping, which really does give it a predatory feeling. So complain away. I just want them to have to say something about it, to publish anything on the topic. Sadly, I don't see that ever happening, because it turns out, regardless of what me and all my friends and a large portion of the community most invested in the series all seeing this as bad game design, it turns out the crowd of less involved players who don't care about any of this crap is pretty damn large, and they probably buy lots of COD points, and the games are selling very well, which I do like to see the game grow, but I mainly worry about how invested those people are going to get in a system like this, because the more invested you get, the more boring it starts to become, the more you start to see the flaws. That learning experience and sense of progression is no more. And it certainly chases away a lot of long-term fans of the series and vocal players. You've got some of the biggest streamers already reverse boosting in the Cold War beta in protest and frustration, which I think is kind of dumb, but it does do a good job of just making a mockery of the game and the system. So I think that could also certainly hurt the game in the long run. It seems short-sighted to me. Although, you know, if you look at the numbers, I'm probably wrong, which is why it's more likely to not change. Maybe all the people complaining about SBMM is good advertising for them, because they think, hey, if casuals see all that SBMM hate spam, they might actually be more inclined to try the game. Although I'm sure there are many others who do not like SBMM in their games and are turned away. It's just fundamentally not what I think is interesting about an online casual game, and I'm surrounded by an echo chamber of people who all seem to think that way and are all quickly dropping away from these games. So I just can't see it as healthy for long-term interest, and I'll always hope for some sort of change, like actually having a good staple ranked mode at launch with casual play being separate and casual. But apparently having a good ranked mode is impossible with a game that releases every year. It's like half the COD games, they attempt something halfway through the year that's a bit too late and doesn't really take off, and half the time they don't bother at all. It's a little sad. That is my take on that, as a pretty average player not liking what it does to the game. It isn't good to play with friends, and I don't feel the game matters at all. I basically just hang around and try to casually grind stuff, because that's what I have fun doing. In case you're wondering, why the hell are you even here if you apparently hate it this much? Well, I like what I do here. I like making challenge guides, I think the zombies should be fun, and I don't come for the campaign, but that has value too, and that's what I'll do. If you don't do those things, and you don't like the SBMM, if it's a deal breaker, then I recommend you just stop playing. It could get better, but I wouldn't expect it. And there are tons of great games out there. As I started with, I know videos like these don't change anything. This just comes up a lot, and I finally wanted a video that talked about it, and only it, to try to explain my point of view. Fantastic. No more repeating myself for 5 minutes every time it comes up. I'm never that happy with these kind of whiny videos. I want to yell at myself, nobody cares, it isn't that serious. But thanks for listening anyway. I'll catch you next time.